Cheryl Anderson, how many seconds do you need? Like 3? Got it.
5-second, the
All
5-second
right.
warning, kind of like the 5-second
Yeah.
rule if you drop something.
You're good. Go ahead.
I'm sure we'll have more people join us, I'm sure. You know, it's
Cheryl
so
Anderson,
early
you
in
need
the
to
day.
cut that out of the video later. Like,
Yeah, we will. We will. All right, you guys. So today, I just want to say, you know, once again, it's a beautiful day. Afternoon, evening is great. So thank you for joining us today, and happy St. Patrick's Day. Should you choose to celebrate driving out snakes, which is sometimes the job we do, you know, driving out snakes. So, Cheryl, don't laugh too much. So, I didn't want to have it all about beer or green rivers or something like that. So, snakes is a good thing. Anyway, I'm Cheryl Neeser, feeling a little goofy today. So, I'm a Scrum Master and a coach with Improving, one of the local firms. Well, actually, we're trying to go global. It's like really exciting. Anyway, I'm really happy to once again be able to welcome those of you that are returning to our meetup. Those of you been here before, and then new attendees as well. We really appreciate you joining our Minnesota Agile community. So today we're going to have another great session with Angela and Karen. I know it's going to be awesome. And of course, you know, I always do this for those that have listened to me babble on. I like to do an introduction for the team. You know, we have Julie Rue from Royal Bank of Canada, Chris, who is with us this afternoon, evening. She is also with Improving. Cheryl Anderson, who is our producer. That gives me the 5-second rule, and I can't even remember the number 5. Anyway, Cheryl is with C Prime. And Craig Schumann is with Orfeo Consulting and Turnberry Solutions. Used to be Three Bridge. And then we have Angela Agresto with Angela Consulting and Training. Marilyn Lang is with Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota. And then we also have a member at large, Mark Strange, and he's with Lucid. So that's our group. Our mission and vision remains really centered around community and being agile. So we welcome practitioners of all backgrounds, all experience levels. Join us. We love to learn together. We love to grow together, and we want to collectively advance, you know, our skills through the sharing of our experiences, perspective, and knowledge. So, and you all bring wonderful conversation and insights. So we really appreciate that when you join us and you contribute to the conversation. So let us know. Again, we always plea, what kind of event topics are you interested in? And then give us feedback on whether we're meeting your needs, because it's really important that we give you what you need so that you can turn around and give back to the others in your community that might not be part of this Minnesota Agile community. So really appreciate that. And then I have only 2 more things before I let Angie and Karen talk. And I wanted to say that next month on April 21st, that's our 3rd Thursday of the month, our meetup, we're going to have Michaela Gardner and Brian Hackerson. Some of you may know them from all the work that they've done with, oh my gosh, I want to say, you know, it's like Agile self-care, right? I think they came to us at a point in time and brought this to our Agile meetup back when it was Agile Twin Cities. And they are going to share their experiences. As Michaela said it, it's like we have some really impactful success stories and some learnings as well. So that's going to be next month. We're really excited about it. So if you've ever enjoyed, you know, their workshops, Finding Your North Star or their Intention workshop, or if you've not had an opportunity to share in their wisdom, please get this on your calendar. We think it'll be like a 5 o'clock, 5 to 6:30-ish kind of time frame on the 21st. We know that's going to happen. And even though I said we don't have a title, it's a TBD, you know, stay tuned because we know it's going to be a really worthwhile use of your time. So we'll get that announcement posted as quickly as we can. And we are looking forward to having you join us. Also, then one other little PSA that I want to share is for those of you that met Blake McMillan in October at our meetup when he talked about Kanban. He is going to be doing some live in-person training in the Minneapolis office. So if you're interested in a PSM or PSBO class, I will be putting some information out in our meetup so that you can get more details on that. But his style and his experience with Agile and with Kanban and those courses, I mean, he's just as delightful and as much an energetic, like really enjoyable trainer. I would say I will follow up with dates and details for you guys. So finally, what you're all really here for, not me talking, is that we have our guest presenters, okay? And it's Angela Agresto, our own Angela Agresto, and her, what was that, Karen? It was like Lennon and McCarthy thing. So for we have this really dynamic duo, and so I've been able, as I'm going to reel it back for a second. So both Angie and Karen have really extensive experience with leading groups, coaching, mentoring, training, building strong teams. I've worked with Angie in the past and enjoyed just being around her and her many talents. Last April, a year ago, she shared a great session here as part of our meetup on brain building blueprints. And as you can see from her bio, she's continued on with that work in her book and her many opportunities to help us all in that arena. And then last month, I met Karen. Karen is with Monarch Agile Solutions. She and Angie taught a course on training from the back of the room, the virtual edition, and it was amazing. That's might be one of my overused words, but it truly was an extraordinary experience and one that I really would recommend to anybody. Take this class because it will help anyone that's interested in upping their game around creation or delivery of training content, how to facilitate events, or if you simply want to encourage more positive interactions with other humans. So today, Angie and Karen are going to share the techniques to engage and encourage and grow the capabilities of our fellow learners. So with that, please join me in welcoming Angela and Karen.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm almost turned up here.
No, don't do that.
I'm gonna just take a second here to share my screen because Karen and I are going old school today. We're gonna do a PowerPoint. I haven't used a PowerPoint in years, so this is kind of like an experiment. We'll see how it goes. But we're going to be doing activities. We just want to try to do them differently instead of doing the traditional breakout rooms. So we're going to try this. You guys let us know how it goes. So first thing, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to make sure it works.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Good. Okay. So we want to begin today by aligning our assumptions on what we believe the differences are between facilitation and traditional presentation. We think that this is important because we're going to exclusively focus today on learner-focused facilitation. Say that 3 times fast. That is a tongue twister, let me tell you. Learner-focused facilitation, exclusively focused on. I'm not going to do it 2 more times, but in our experience, the focus of a presentation is on the presenter. All the materials, the presenter's behaviors, and the actions are centered around them. The goals for the presentation is to cover the material, and the actions are centered exclusively on the presenter. It showcases the presenter's expertise and skills, and a presentation derives credibility solely from their subject matter expertise and presentation skills. Facilitation, on the other hand, is intentionally learner-centered with the purpose to guide the learners to agreed upon destinations, which are the learning outcomes. And as a guide, the facilitator establishes the climate, learning structure, and the flow of learning. And of course, facilitators know the subject area, but more than that, the facilitator is concerned with helping the learners know and apply the subject matter. The facilitator's goal is not simply to inform, but to equip the learners for self-development and growth and continual learning about the subject, even after they leave the room. Effective facilitation gives up much of the control of the content to the learner audience and shares responsibility for the learning of the learner audience. And in order to do that, we truly need to understand how the learner learns best. And I'm going to tell you guys, I've already failed on this whole PowerPoint thing because I haven't advanced the slides. Just goes to show you, you lose your practice. Our agenda today, number 1, aligning assumptions. Number 2, the RAS brain, limbic system, and the importance of establishing psychological safety. 3, we're going to talk about cognitive neuroscience and the significance of the neocortex. Number 4, we're going to give you guys 6 cognitive neuroscience techniques that you're going to be able to take away today and apply to any of your future facilitation classes. We'll do a quick wrap up and try to save a few minutes for some questions. And we got a couple gifts for you before you leave. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Karen.
Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
The first thing that we really want to do is introduce you to our team. So we have on the left, Boris, the brain scientist, and Dirk, the data dude. And these guys have been instrumental in helping us put this together, always asking the right questions and engaging with us with a little bit of humor. And so Boris, you'll get to see his personality throughout this, as you will Dirk, the data dude. So one of the things that we're going to move into next, do you want to advance the slide to the next?
Sorry, guys, these are the 2 that I missed.
So the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do as a group is please type into the chat some of the things that you need personally in a learning scenario for you to feel psychologically safe. Let's go ahead and start seeing what some of those things are in the chat. The openness from Marilyn. Thank you. The ability to ask questions without judgment, Stephanie. Look at them. Wow, they're all coming in. Explore without judgment, being listened to, the chance to speak. Excuse me, think before I'm asked to speak, encouragement to ask questions, feeling connected. Yes, yeah. Yeah, for me, one of my key ones has always been no stupid questions, right? Because if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it too. I had a really wise teacher years ago tell me that. Feeling connected and feeling engaged. Yeah, those are all really great things. Psychological safety is so important. You're going to see how we weave that in a little bit. If we could go to the next slide. So we're going to be doing a poll. So you can either text Karen Bruns 095 to the number 22333. And what is your preferred learning style? The other thing that you can do is go to poll.ev / Karen Bruns 095 and enter your particular learning style, your preferred learning style. And we should be able to see this update automatically. So this is one of our newest tricks in PowerPoint.
What was the website again? I don't see it.
POLLEV.
Is there any chance you can paste it in the chat?
Yeah, let me grab it from here.
Thank you.
That's one of the things that doesn't show. There you go. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Vlad, for asking for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Word belongs to Oscars.
Love it.
Gosh, I can't even type.
Has anybody typed anything in yet or made your selections yet, or are people still? Yeah.
I
Okay.
pressed the button and it's becoming blue. Is that all I need to do?
That is all you need to do. So this is one
Okay,
of those
cool.
things that's brand new. There we go.
Sweet.
Did it. Yes. All right.
I told you guys this was going to be an experiment.
So this is awesome. So we've got 29% auditory, 53% visual, and kinesthetic 18%. With just a quick reactions on the lower Zoom tray, how many of you do you think, more than one of these in any given learning situation? Let's start seeing some reactions. Yep, got some hands going up. I definitely do. I think it depends on the material, right? So what we've just done is an activity called polling. Polling is something that you can do to get a sense of community, to get a sense of groupings of folks, and we can get to understand a little bit more about our learner audience by using polling. You could go to the next slide. So here's some really cool thing. This is International Brain Awareness Week. How cool is that we actually get to talk about this stuff during the actual International Brain Awareness Week, which is March 14th through the 20th. And this is a time to support and share brain-related research and have fun and demonstrate various informative and fun information about the brain, which is what we're going to do today. So it's pretty cool that it is our topic for this presentation as well. And when I found it, I told Angela, she was like, no, this is so good. So we were so excited about that.
It was a total coincidence, you guys. Like, seriously, we did not
yeah.
plan this. It just happened this way.
Yeah, total coincidence. What was cool about it was I was just getting ready to start working on, like email types of things for my website, and I use a site builder, and it had this whole list of things about these are the things you could talk about this week. And I was, shut up, it's International Brain Awareness Week. That is so good. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to talk to you about this thing called the reticular activating system. So like Angela gave you a try to say that 3 times fast phrase. This is the second one you could try to say 3 times fast. So I'm going to start with, how many of you have driven a particular path regularly anywhere, like to work, for example, and you drive your car and you find that you get there, you have no idea how you got there? Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
All the time. Yeah, it happens every day. And I sit there and I think, if people that, in the insurance agencies knew this, our rates would be a lot higher. So yeah, Jennifer, exactly. It's autopilot. This is our reticular activating system at work. And so we were talking earlier about trying to say it 3 times fast, see if your tongue gets tied. Mine definitely does. So we're going to shorten this. We're going to call it the RAS brain. And RAS is really, it's the name of a bundle of nerves and brain systems that tell us what to pay attention to and what to ignore. So if you hold your hand up and you look at your smallest finger, everybody do that with me. Hold your hand up, look at your smallest finger, and then just about this much of your smallest finger is actually the RAS, the reticular activating system. Combined with the other pieces of the brainstem, this makes up the first point of entry of information. So as we look at the reticular activating system, or the RAS, it's made up of all kinds of things, different parts of smaller parts of the brain that help us make or break your conscious attention to something. RAS screens for sensory data coming into the brain, and it decides what you need to pay attention to and what you can ignore. So in essence, if we go to the next slide, thank you. In essence, this is the part of the brain is kind of like having your automatic pilot kick into overdrive. So whenever anything is routine, repetitive, or just plain boring, the RAS says to your conscious thinking brain, we do this every day. You don't have to pay attention. I've got this covered. You go totally take a rest, right? So then when we do that, then our conscious mind begins to think about things like our to-do list, our grocery list, work meetings, picking kids up from school, taking a pet to the vet, news on the radio. We're doing anything but thinking about the actual driving of the path that we're on. So I want to be clear. So when RAS is in action, it doesn't actually look for patterns, but it looks for your experiences, and it lines it up with your previous experience. Now, the neocortex is what looks for patterns, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. So think back to a time when you were driving. You were so caught up in your thoughts that you missed your exit. How many people have done that? Yep. Yeah, you know what? We've all got a brain. It's all happening. And then what happens when you had the experience when all of a sudden you're like, oh, I missed my exit. Oh my God, now I have to adjust. Now I have to think. How many have had that experience? Raise your hand on that one. Yep. Yeah. So what's happening is that's the RAS brain telling us, whoa, something is different during our routine. And you need to wake up and you need to pay attention because something is different and you've just missed something. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is we're going to start talking about things like this. I'm going to ask you to grab a piece of paper. I've got a lovely piece of orange paper here. And the first thing you're going to do when you get that paper is you're going to fold it in half, one direction. And then you're going to fold it in half lengthwise. Okay. And we do this to separate the paper into 4 pieces. See that? Pretty cool. So the RAS, we're doing this because I want to give you a little sheet. RAS pays attention to 4 major elements. So in the very first segment, we're going to write the word novelty. Okay. As you're writing that, I want to share with you that the human brain pays attention to anything that's new. Anything that's new to your experience, you haven't had this before, it's going to start paying attention. Your learners are going to pay more attention to new ways of learning than to the traditional lecture-based methods that they're used to. For our next one, we're going to write the word contrast. So regarding contrast, the human brain pays attention to anything in the environment that's in contrast or contrasts with what just happened, what's coming next, what you anticipate to do next. And your learners are going to pay more attention to non-traditional learning environments, such as ones like we're doing right now. We started with polling, we're moving into this having you fold the paper, so you're actually getting involved in your own learning. Learners will also pay more attention to changes in activities and differences from what they expect to take place. If you think about it, when you've gone into some kind of a training scenario or even a conversation like this talk right here, your brain might be trying to anticipate what's coming next. So the very next thing,
Kind of like mine did when I advanced the slide too fast.
yeah. So the very next one that we're going to write is meaning. So the human brain pays attention to anything that is personally meaningful. Your learners are going to pay more attention to anything that's relevant to them. So remember when I talked about RAS in the beginning, we talked about it's experientially based. This is where this comes into play. And our very last word to write into our segments is emotion. And there's Boris demonstrating his emotion. So the human brain pays more attention to anything that elicits emotion, whether it's positive or negative. The more emotional an experience is, the better it's remembered. Excuse me. And again, that's positive or negative. So John Medina is the author of a book called Brain Rules. And he says that emotions are kind of like the brain's sticky notes. Emotions tell the brain what to remember. I love that phrase because I've got a million sticky notes around me at any given time. Now I know what the inside of my brain looks like. So this is when emotions tell the brain what to remember, it's because the brain doesn't actually separate emotions from learning. This is one of the main reasons why storytelling is such a powerful way to learn and to remember anything. It's also the reason that we can sit and pay attention a lot longer to something that captures our emotions than to something that only appeals to logic. So I'm going to leave you with that piece of paper to remind you. And I'm going to introduce you to my friend, Bertha Brain. Like me with my glasses on top, Bertha has her glasses on top of her head. So Bertha Brain is one of my best friends because She tells us an awful lot. Bertha wanted me to demonstrate a little bit about her structure and its relative importance to Brain Awareness Week. So let's start with a question. Raise your hand on screen or using the reaction. The first word, David, was novelty. Excuse me. So raise your hand on screen or using the reactions in the bottom Zoom tray if you've had a conversation with someone and then 2, 3, 6, 10 hours later, even 4 days later said, God, I should have said this. And it was something sarcastic or aimed. Anybody?
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Here come the hands. Yeah, absolutely. Or what about in that same length of time, you think to yourself, you know, if I was being my best self, I could have said something wise or rational that would have de-escalated the conversation into something productive. Anybody with that? The I wish I would have said that would have left us in a more positive light. Well, there's a reason for that. So all of your information that you get comes in through the brainstem. It all goes in through the brainstem. And just like at the brainstem here, you'll see on Bertha, she's got these little purple triangles. I like to think of those as teeth that grab onto that information. And as that's happening, the very first stop is the rasbrain, where Bertha checks to see if she needs to pay attention to this information. Does she need to pay attention to it, or can she pass it along? She passes it along. The very next stop is the limbic system, which is somewhere in about right here. And this is where Bertha checks to emotionally respond. You know, how do I respond to this, she thinks. Do I want to respond positively or negatively? And with lightning speed, Bertha processes this information against your personal experiences or the stories that you've heard, maybe even the stories you've been telling yourself. And she determines whether we need to fight, flee, or freeze, right? Or should we pass the information along to continue its journey through the brain? In other words, is the experience against which I'm judging this information, is it positive or negative? And the very last stop is the prefrontal cortex, where Bertha can finally access reason, logic, even understanding. So let's think about that conversation that I asked you about earlier. When we think we should have said something sarcastic, this means that our thought is still kind of hanging out in that limbic region, the emotional region. And when we think we could have said something rational and logic or shown understanding, that thought is no longer in our limbic system, and it's finally landed in our prefrontal cortex. And we're not going to talk about the other stops along the journey in today's talk, but I'll give you this hint. If you ever feel like you're bouncing back and forth between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, you're bouncing between emotion and logic, then you probably are. And the cause of that is how impactful the experience was that causes it to hold on to that limbic system and hang out there for a little bit longer. So we're going to do another activity, and this one's called a chat storm. So Dirk, the data dude, is anxious to see this information. So I'm going to ask you a question and that he's written for us, and you're going to type it into the chat, but don't hit enter, okay? And then we'll hit enter all at the same time. And in this way, we'll be able to see everybody's responses appear at the same time. So if you open your chat and get ready, Dirk's question is, why is what we've just been talking about important to know? So go ahead and type your response, but don't hit enter. I'll give you a minute to do that. Why is what we've been talking about important to know? And we're going to hit enter on 3. 1, 2, 3. Hit enter. Woo! Look at them all come. Okay, let's see. Let's read some of these. This is great. We can help attendees learn best when we know how the brain works. Understanding our reaction and response. To understand your reactions, yes. To understand how your brain helps you process information, yeah. so that you understand how learners learn and can modify your facilitation to accommodate that. Yes. Good to know that how our brain takes info in. Yes. Whether we apply logic or emotion to get someone's attention. Ooh, interesting. I like that. We can understand ourselves better. It's foundational to avoid saying something inappropriate. Helps to know how much people process and respond to information, the filters that they will learn from. I'll add to that and say, and through. It's getting more difficult to keep people engaged. Yeah. You can engage people in a more helpful way and understanding how the learners learn. Yeah. So how does all of this information tie into the importance of psychological safety? The answer to this is, if we can create psychological safety in a learning environment, we can help enable our learners' brains to move past the negative lens of the limbic system. We could do so more quickly. Without psychological safety, people can stay stuck in the limbic system and the resulting emotional reaction longer. And if you think about a time that you might have been stuck in that space, it doesn't feel good to be there, you know? So a great way to build psychological safety in an environment is to do what we did earlier, to ask people what they need to feel psychologically safe. Their answers will tell you a lot. The psychological safety enables the brain to be present when and where it needs to be so that they're learning the best. I'm going to turn this over to Angie.
Awesome. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about cognitive neuroscience. And cognitive neuroscience is the branch of science which studies how the human brain takes in information, stores it, retrieves it, and then reuses it. So the human brain is a pattern-seeking organ, and it naturally and normally is looking for ways to connect information into patterns or chunks that are easier for us to be able to remember. A really simple example of that is our social security numbers. I think most of us remember those in 3 chunks, right? I'm not going to tell you my social security number, but that's an example. The brain does this for 2 main reasons. So one is it wants to save time and it needs to save energy. So learner-focused facilitation is brain-based facilitation. Therefore, learner-focused facilitation occurs when we're intentionally choosing to facilitate with the learner in mind. And to do that, we need to know how their minds work, which means that we also need to consider the cognitive neuroscience, which tells us how our brains learn best, how their brains learn best. So the neocortex part of the brain accounts for 76% of the brain's total volume. So it's the entire piece that goes on the top, right? It's larger in humans than it is in any other animal. And some animals don't even have a neocortex at all, like birds and reptiles. This part of the brain is the reason why humans have unique mental abilities. And trust me when I tell you that the list of job requirements of the neocortex is exhaustive and so impressive that we could literally spend hours simply discussing its capabilities so that we don't have time for that today. So we're going to do a simple activity together to demonstrate how it works. But first, I'm going to give you a little list of what the neocortex controls. So language, consciousness, motor commands, sensory perception, conscious thought, spatial reasoning, connections between all the other parts of the brain, our body temperature. It stores information about an environment. How do we find food? And all of the other resources that are required to just simply live. It's responsible for memory, visual cortex, auditory cortex, and it's the thing that reminds us that we're hungry when you smell fresh baked bread. And that's all just before you go to bed. The neocortex is active even when you sleep because it's critical in memory consolidation, which is called sleep-dependent memory processing. So those nights when you feel like you just didn't get a good night's sleep? Well, there's a reason for that. Your neocortex is performing that particular processing, dependent memory processing, while you're sleeping. And when your brain has to spend a lot of extra energy doing that, then you just don't sleep quite as well. Remember a few moments ago, I said that the human brain is a pattern-seeking organ. It literally has so many functions that it has to find ways to simplify processes where it can save time and conserve energy. So right now we're going to do a quick brain exercise to demonstrate the neurocortex part of our brain in action right now. On this slide, what you're seeing is a line of numbers 1 through 10. Give me a thumbs up if you guys are all with me on the slide. Okay, perfect. We're going to do 4 things with these numbers. 1, I want you to silently add all the numbers together to obtain the sum. Give me a show of some hands or reactions to let me know when you've got some numbers so I can get an idea of who's done. Perfect. Now, take a moment to just think about how did you get to the sum? Did you add up the numbers from left to right or right to left? I'd like to ask some volunteers if you'll share how did you get to the number and what is the number that you got?
Again, I paired them up. So 1 and 9, 2 and 8, 3 and 7, 4 and 6, those are all multiples of, or add up to 10 and then add in the 5 and the 10 for 55.
I did the same.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer.
Or 11 by 5.
Yes. Who else?
That was too easy. You should say 1 to 1,000, for example.
I don't know if I could get that done in time. All right. Does there anybody have any other ways besides grouping 10s and 5s?
Left to right.
Yep. Did anybody do right to left? Were there any other ways that we did not mention besides those 4?
I'll tell you how I did it the first time. I put it in an Excel spreadsheet and hit sum.
Nice, Karen.
Math freaks me out.
I did right
Use your
to left.
tools.
That is called outsourcing.
Yeah.
Oh, the last
See,
time
that's
that
funny.
we did this exercise, somebody raised their hand and said, I did something different. And I was like, really, what did you do? And they said, I waited for everybody else to come up with the answer and tell me what it was. So this exercise demonstrates the different ways in which our neocortex seeks out patterns, breaks it down in the content in smaller chunks to simplify the tasks to save us time. Every single time the brain saves itself time and energy, it finds patterns or shortcuts, as we've demonstrated in this exercise we all just completed. It receives a little zing of endorphins or pleasure chemicals. It is as if the brain has its own internal reward system for figuring things out on its own, instead of being told how to figure them out. So the human brain learns better by being involved, engaged. And as facilitators, we have to create techniques which allows the brain to figure things out on its own. I know that's a lot, but before we leave today, Karen and I are also going to share 6 cognitive enhancements that you can easily apply to all your future facilitation sessions, regardless of the role that you're in, the people that you teach, or the content that you teach. Now, right now, I'm kind of thinking some of you might be wondering why and how is it that Karen and I know so much about our brains, about your brains, and why we feel it's so important to share all of this with you today. So as coaches and trainers, Karen and I spend the majority of our days helping others learn, probably like a lot of you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I can't even tell you how many times we have experimented with different facilitation styles and or techniques. Sometimes they flop. Other times there are these huge successes. Of course, we continue to use the ones which work. We set aside the ones that don't. However, we never really understood why the ones that worked actually worked until we began to learn more about the brain. And then we simply wanted to make sure that we took the time to share it here with you. Well, now you have the why. We are so passionate about these brain-based techniques and sharing them with you. How is another story? And I'm going to share that with you in a couple of minutes. But first, we're going to do another activity. So this one is called Quick Write. And I've got a slide out of order. So we're going to pretend like that didn't happen. So grab a piece of paper, a Post-it note, index card, or something to write with. It doesn't matter. It can be digital, it can be physical, whatever your preference is. All I'd like you to do is just take a moment. Think back to your own facilitation experiences, like the ones I kind of just shared with you about Karen and I. You may have used techniques that flopped, some that worked amazingly. Think about the ones that you love and that you use repeatedly. On your paper, Post-it, your digital note, whatever it is you're using, just write down the name of one of your favorite facilitation techniques, and then make a note. Why do you think it works so well? So we have time for 1 or 2 people to share. Is there anybody willing or who is willing to share what your favorite technique or activity is with us? And maybe even why you feel like it connects so well with your learners?
So this is John. I'll do it. It's what you just did. You just asked someone, you asked everyone to say, what is your experience? And then that gets them engaged and gets them to start to think about the topic a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Bill has his hand raised.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I tell stories actually, and sometimes I'll do it right in the middle of when you're teaching a point, right? You know, you're through a slide, and I'll stop and I will physically laugh and say, I got a funny story for you because it occurred to me, right? And it humanizes it, right? And it reminds people that you're not just fire hosing them with information, but rather you're sharing a part of yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. And I have to tell you, it's a perfect segue for me. So right now, I'm going to share with you how I know so much about the brain, how it works, sometimes why it doesn't, or simply sometimes why it can't. So in February of 2014, I left work in the middle of the day, like many of us do, to go to a doctor's appointment and grab a quick lunch on my way back to the office. I was driving down 32nd Avenue South in Fargo, North Dakota, about a half a mile away from the clinic when I stopped for a red light. It was a busy intersection, 2 traveling lanes with a turn lane on both the left and the right sides of the roads, which allowed for the traffic to exit this busy roadway because there's a hospital on my right and a library on the left. As I waited for the light, I glanced down. I looked at my clock. I'm checking to see if I'm running late or if I'm going to get there on time, right? I'm stuck at a red light. I noticed there's a car on either side of me, one in the left turn lane and one in the second travel lane to my right. The light is about to turn green for the cross traffic, and you can tell that the cars are ready to pounce as soon as it does. I mean, everybody's in such a hurry these days. I look in my rearview mirror and I notice that there's a vehicle coming at me at a high rate of speed. Well, higher than they should be, while the rest of the cars, me, are completely stopped directly in front of them. In an instant, my brain processes all the vehicles in all the lanes around me, which traffic is about to accelerate into the intersection. And I look back, this car is not slowing down. I'm about to be hit, and there's nothing I can do about it. I think, don't panic. What are your options? Can I pull out in front of the car to the left lane? No. The cars from the library are going to hit me. Can I pull out in front of the car to the right? No, because the cars from the hospital will hit me, or I'll hit them. Okay, I'm starting to panic. Can I hit the gas and go straight? No, the traffic just got the green. Look in the mirror. Oh shit, I'm about to get hit. Okay, push your foot to the floor, all the way to the floor. Grab the wheel as firmly as you can, and no matter what happens, don't let go. I'm not sure if I will hit the crossing traffic, and I'm scared to death. So I close my eyes and I hang on for dear life. Several minutes later, I realized I was hit. And then I realized I'm alive. All the cars I saw before, they're all gone, except for me and the one directly behind me. I see it in the mirror, my side mirror. I look at the rear view mirror, but the mirror is missing. I must have fallen off. The mirror must have fallen off during the impact. I look again at the side mirror. The car behind me is scrunched up like an accordion on wheels. I don't understand how much time has passed. I don't know where all the cars were that I saw before. The cars and the people in them, they're all gone. I realize I need to just take a moment to observe if I'm hurt. I don't see any blood. I don't see any cuts, and I don't feel anything that's broken. The car behind me is bad, real bad, but I realize I can move. So I open my door, I step out the driver's side, gather my balance, and I walk towards the car that hit me. I can see the man inside. He's older than myself, but he's not moving. I walk up to the window and I check on him and I ask, "Are you okay?" He says, "I think so." He self-assesses and he steps outside with me. And then he starts to apologize repeatedly. And I look at him and I tell him, "I'm just glad we're both okay." We discover both of our cars are drivable. So we exit the roadway and we call the police for assistance. While we wait, I actually called my doctor to tell her that happened and then I was okay, and asked if it was okay if I came late. She says, "Of course." I'm honestly not sure, you guys, how my brain even thought that was important at the time, but for some reason it did. The gentleman who hit me was cited for an accident. His car was towed out of the parking lot. The police officer documented the event, shared the report number with both of us. We exchanged our insurance information. Someone picked him up and I went to my doctor's appointment late. And then I drove back to work. I was frustrated, yet grateful I was not hurt. Over the next year and a half, I struggled with even the simplest of cognitive functions. Later, remembering even my sister-in-law's name, not her last one, her first one. And it's not a hard one, it's Amy. I was physically exhausted, emotionally drained, and I felt like I could not remember anything anymore. But people dismissed all of my complaints. "Oh, you're just getting older. Getting older sucks, doesn't it? Ha ha ha," right? Don't be so hard on yourself, Angie. Everybody forgets things sometimes. But I knew that this was so much more. I couldn't recall simple facts. I couldn't remember my memories, my experiences, or tell a story because I couldn't recall the words that I needed just to be able to tell the story. At the time of my accident, I worked full-time as a team coach and I was going to school to get my master's degree. My grades dropped. I ended up having to leave school and take a break because I simply couldn't get the work done anymore. More than a dozen doctors later, I discovered something had happened during that accident, something that no one could see. I had suffered from a traumatic brain injury. The impacts from my invisible injury directly related to how my brain learned, stored, retained, retrieved, and reused information. Historical data, memory, experiences, and even people's names were impossible, sometimes fully, for me to be able to recall, and it became harder and harder to find ways to process and learn new information. I began to work with a cognitive therapist, and I learned how the brain works, and I learned what was wrong with mine. I wanted so desperately to understand what was wrong with me and how can you fix me? My cognitive therapist introduced me to something called the energy pie. So the energy pie is a graph which demonstrates to us what a healthy brain looks like, what it functions like. You'll notice in this picture that our brains are always trying to ensure that there is more energy reserved than what is needed for physical, cognitive, and emotional processing. Now, the brain stores these reserves for emergencies, like when we need energy for fight, flight, or flee. The graph will fluctuate for all of us from day to day. That's normal. For example, the brain will utilize some reserves when you are experiencing high levels of stress. If you stay up late, if you are going to a function and so you don't get home till 2 in the morning, or maybe you're like me and you just spent the weekend binging on a TV series and you didn't do what you need to do to take care of yourself. It's normal for this to happen on occasion. And I'm sure you all know what it feels like when your brain is borrowing energy from your reserves. You know, when you're sick or you're just plain exhausted, or you feel like you're walking around the house in a brain fog, like a zombie, it seems like it takes longer to process your thoughts and your feelings. Well, that's because it does. It does take longer. When your brain borrows from your energy reserves, your cognitive processing and your reasoning will take longer. The brain's job is to ensure that there is enough energy for all functions. I mean, it controls everything. It's the powerhouse. But survival has to come first. So when the brain begins to deplete its energy reserves, it has to borrow energy from other areas. And usually we notice it as a feeling of being physically tired, emotionally drained, or just plain slow, confused. Those feelings or feeling of exhaustion are your brain's way of signaling to you it's time for rest. We need to recharge and replenish our reserves. You get the rest you need, or the stressful event is resolved, and then you begin to feel more like yourself again. The cognitive therapist could never tell me if I would fully recover, but it was clear that I needed to learn new ways to process and store information. At the time, the cognitive therapist would tell me, you guys, this is what the energy pie looks like. This is the difference between a healthy brain and an injured brain, or when you're going through a stressful event, something just isn't working right. You can see in this picture that the reserves are at 10% instead of the 51 that they were before. And what's happening in this picture is that the brain is stealing from all of the other areas to be able to make things work. And cognitive reasoning is the one that takes the most amount of energy. So at the time, this is when I messed up on, I apologize. At the time, all right, I'm done with the PowerPoint. At the time, the cognitive therapist couldn't tell me if I would ever fully recover, but it was clear that I needed to learn new ways to process and store information. So we started with the basics. We start to write things down to help me remember them, especially important things, like writing down appointments. I needed to be somewhere at a certain time. There was something I needed to do. I needed to be at team meetings. I needed to create these things. I had a test at school. So she told me that with my classwork, I had to break it down into smaller segments of time, study for 10 or 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes, and then take a break, walk away, allow for your brain to process and restore some energy. We discovered that it was easier for me throughout this process just to use pictures. And so she told me to start drawing when I was taking notes. She said, draw pictures, do doodles when you're taking notes. I said, I can't draw. Have you ever seen me draw a picture? She said, it didn't matter. So long as I tried, that was all that mattered, because my brain could actually remember more photos than it could text. Everything took me longer than what I was previously capable of doing. But these tricks helped me find a sense of normalcy. And slowly over the next few years, my historical information became easier and easier to retrieve. Telling you my story here today explains how I learned so much about my brain. But I hope my story actually helps you understand that it's simply not possible for us to see what's going on inside somebody else's life, their brain, or their energy pie status. However, as facilitators, we can use simple tricks like the ones I learned from my cognitive therapist, and the ones Karen and I are sharing with you today, to create learning experiences which focus on our learners and how they learn best and not on us. With that said, let's just take a break. This is called a body break. It's not actually an invitation to get up and walk away. Body breaks are used to create movement. And when we create movement, we are actually introducing oxygen to the brain. And oxygen is the energy that our brains need to be able to continue to retain and store and retrieve information. So all I would like for you guys to do is just take your hands and please simply just stretch them way up over the top of your head. And as you do that, take a deep breath, just, and then breathe out. Wiggle your fingers, reach as high as you can. And then as you take another deep breath, just drop your hands down to your sides and breathe out. Take another big deep breath and then exhale. Exhale. Shrug your shoulders, just move them a little bit. Let the stress go. God, that feels good. Does that feel good to anybody else? Take another deep breath, and then as you drop your shoulders back down, just exhale. And take 5 seconds to just simply shake the stress away. Shake. Again, that's what we like to call a body break. We're inserting a moment into our facilitation to ensure that we're intentionally creating space for movement, because movement supplies oxygen to the brain, and oxygen is the fuel that our brains need to process, to store, and to continuously retrieve information.
Well, thank you, Angela. Appreciate you sharing that story. It's a very personal story to share, but it has so much value, I think, to the things that we're trying to convey today. So next up, we're going to start with some fun of providing you with 6 cognitive enhancements right here, right now, that you can immediately apply to all your future training classes. And it's not even going to cost you a dime. That's right. Free today only, right? Not 1 penny. There's no recommendations to go buy your participants a bottle of vitamins, B6, B12, E, or to pump them up with beta carotene, folic acid, or any of the infamous and trendy antioxidants or omega-3s. They don't need to get a cup of coffee. They don't need a jolt of something else. And I promise that as we learn these things, it's going to be simple, painless for you, the trainer, and it's going to change how your future participants learn and retain the information that you share in your training classes and your workshops, even in meetings, right? Even facilitation sessions. So this is literally a no-brainer. And yes, we do intend that pun. So what we're going to do is take a look at what Angie has up here on the screen. And I'm going to let her get started with the first one.
Perfect. All right, so the first one is images trump words. So long-term memory is unlimited, and simple photos or metaphors to your lecture materials. Images evoke emotion. It's almost impossible for the brain to remain focused on anything devoid of emotion, because emotions are a trigger for our brain to pay attention. Our long-term memory will rely on images and the emotions that are connected to the images. And the more emotion that the image evokes or story makes it easier for us to remember.
The next one that we're going to talk about is talking trumps listening. Learning is social. We allow learners to create their own stories, and a lot of people don't actually listen actively or properly or fully, if you will. But when we talk, we also hear ourselves.
Movement trumps sitting. So exercise boosts brain power. So by building movement into your content delivery, you're ensuring that you're increasing the energy and enhancing the cognition of the participants in your room. And when the learners move, any type of movement, so what we just did, or you could just have them move things around. You can get very, very detailed with it, but just keep it simple is all we want you to know here. Is when you get them moving, you increase blood circulation. When you do that, more oxygen flows directly to the brain, and then the brain is able to process more neurons and work more effectively because it's getting more oxygen.
Next up is writing trumps reading. Writing is a whole brain activity, a whole brain task. So remember to stop talking as a facilitator and have your learners write what they've learned. We've done that with you once today. We've actually done it with you twice in having you write something else. The act of writing brings about a few things. One, when you write, you're actually reading silently. Two, when you read silently, I don't know if you've ever paid attention to this, but you actually hear a voice in your head reading. It's your own voice that you hear.
Mm-hmm.
And three, the act of movement while writing gets oxygen to your brain, which allows us to remember what we've written. That's kind of cool, huh?
All right, shorter trumps longer. So the brain learns best when content is divided into small chunks, grouping facts into larger categories or major concepts. Remember the number line activity we did a little earlier today? That's an example of how the brain is always looking for ways to simplify processing by creating smaller chunks of content that the brain doesn't have, so that the brain doesn't have time to wander off and go someplace else.
My favorite one of all of these is this last one, and that is different trumps same. We talked earlier about the brain noticing change, a change in environment, instructional methods, different learning activities. When we're doing those on a regular basis, your brain notices it. And when we talked earlier about the RAS brain, our brain is looking for the familiar. It's looking for experiences that we can compare it to. So if we need to mix it up, if we really want the attention of the RAS. So how have we mixed it up today during our talk? Let's hear from a few people. You can put it into the chat or call it out loud.
Different people talking.
Different people talking, great. How else?
Yep, lots of different activities, McKenna said.
Pictures.
Yes.
Yeah, pictures, images.
Stories.
What was the last one?
Storytelling.
Storytelling, yeah. We use different items, the brain toy. Bertha got recognition. She's going to love that, you guys.
I love Bertha. She's
I won't
awesome.
be able to shut her up later tonight.
Uh,
I think the first thing we did was really interesting, right? I mean, there was nothing really important about creating a paper in 4 sections, but by the act of doing it, it created some novelty that allowed us to maybe process the information in a new way, even though we could have just simply written down 4 words. You did it in a way that kind of
Yeah,
helped me
that was
remember
good.
those 4 concepts.
yeah.
Even polling was different. We've had you raise your hand. We've had you use reaction buttons. So we're going to move into wrapping up. We began our session today by aligning on what facilitation means to us as educators, trainers, coaches. We then introduced the role of the RAS, the reticular activating system, and its connection to psychological safety. Then we demonstrated how the neocortex is a pattern-seeking powerhouse, which operates and regulates and how our brain and our body function. It had that massive list, and there were so many more that Angela didn't read. And then we got to share the why. And Angela shared her story about how we feel about understanding about the brain functions and processes, how information is connected to learner-focused facilitation. And we clarified the significance of why the brain needs to save time and energy where it can through the energy pie. And you've just received 6 simple brain-based principles, which can help improve your facilitation with their very first use. So as we leave today, we're going to close with one final activity. Angela, do you want to do this one?
Sure. So this last activity is called rapid reflection. And we're going to do this using the chat storm. If you guys remember the chat storm, we did that earlier. You typed an answer to a question into the chat, but nobody presses enter. We go to 3, and then we all hit enter at the same time. So the first question is, what is one thing that you learned today that you can use tomorrow? Go ahead and type it in, and I'll give you guys a few seconds, and I'll let you know when I'm going to start to count. All right, we're going to go on 3. So 1, 2, 3. I can't use that finger.
So we've got body breaks, images with emotional content enhances comprehension. Remember to have people do something physical, about how the brain looks for patterns in smaller pieces. Writing trumps reading. I like chat storm. It's new to me and different.
Yeah.
I need to mix things up, offer to do something, be extraordinarily different, move, and adding different activities.
All right, let's do another question. Of the things we shared today, which did you connect with the most?
Ready for them to hit enter?
1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Hmm.
New techniques. How does the brain work? How
Thank
your brain
you to those of you who were talking about the energy pie in my story. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like the trumps. They seem very actionable.
Hmm.
Yeah, the story of why movement trumps sitting, energy pie. Awesome.
We've got one more question for you guys today. We saved a little bit of time for questions, so I'm going to give this one to you, but I'm going to let you go ahead and process it while Karen shares a couple of last little things with you. And the question is, which of the things that we shared today has you curious to know more? So as we move into the Q&A, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and think about that one for a few seconds. And Karen, I'll let you share the last few words.
Cool. So when you're ready with that last answer, go ahead and just hit enter into the chat. We want to thank you for having us. It was a lot of fun for us today. If you'd like to learn more, we want you to take a minute to feel free to check out our websites. We have several training from the back of the room virtual edition classes this year, which focus on brain-based facilitation techniques. And it's the same class that Cheryl Neeser was in April. And this class will take it to the next level for you by demonstrating a 4 simple step instructional design, which works with any topic and any type of learner. So before you leave, we want you to know that we have 2 departing gifts. They're available for download in the slide deck for everyone. If you just need to click on there where it says to click. The first is the 6 trumps cards to remind you of the 6 trumps we shared with you today. And then the next one, it looks like you've got a little deck of card there, the bonus. It's 10 easy ways to enhance any learning experience. And these are called pocket cards. Introduces helpful reminders to introduce movement and oxygen to your brain so that you're permitting oxygen to get to the brain so that you can retain the information that we need. And we've got Dirk the data dude spinning his little neurons there. So we want to ask what questions you might have.
Oh, McKenna, you can't click on it right now. We're going to give you guys the slide deck and then the links are inside and you'll be able to actively click on them.
Okay. There it is.
This is Lori. I have a question. When we were talking about writing trumps reading, how would you work that into a training session? I mean, other than, you had us write some stuff down, but how would you do that in a short spurt so that the people are writing and reading basically at the same time?
I'll tell you how I do it. I give my learners their workbook in PDF format, because what's tempting for some of the learners is to type into a Word document, and the typing doesn't necessarily have the same impact on retention as does handwriting. So I give them that, I ask them to print it out, and then some of the exercises, they're short exercises, but it might be like a word match into a sentence, or maybe 5 or 6 sentences, and then you've got the words printed over on the right-hand side. They have to then write those words in the appropriate sentence, for example.
Perfect, thank you.
And even,
Go ahead.
I was just going to add any type of worksheets that you can do as well.
Yeah.
Even if it's simple, fill in the blank, so that they have to read and then write part of the answer or write the answer to a question. Those are also different ways that you can get people writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you highlight a good point, because I am a writer, and it seems that that is getting lost with training classes. Everything's online now, and you don't even get an option, even like using Mural. I don't have anything now as a book in advance to write on. And so it seems like it's getting worse instead of helping. And I don't know what to do, because anytime I do the training, I'm cognizant of that. But when I'm a recipient of the training, it's really hard. Any suggestions?
One of the things that Karen and I do in our training classes is we have pages in the workbooks that are dedicated space for participants to go to. Mm-hmm. And then we actually provide chunks of time during the class to direct them to go to those pages and write down what they've learned. So we intentionally put those and it's simple, just a minute or 2. Okay, everybody turn to page 12, write down any of the new stuff that you learned today that you want to make sure you take away. And sometimes we go through enough stuff in one day session, we might do that a couple times, and then we'll reflect at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
Do you have suggestions on, as a learner, when people are not as good as you guys, providing that work up front? So we can take it offline, but I think that is something that has become more popular now. So I'll follow up with you guys after, because
well, I can tell you that, this is Lori speaking again. I I'm old school. I still have a notebook that I take notes in, and that's what I did during today's session. I didn't realize though, something I've started doing is taking notes electronically. And I agree though, I know that my brain does not retain as much of that as it does when I handwrite. Unfortunately, I don't know about anybody else, but I've got hand arthritis now, so writing sometimes is tough. Typing's easier, but anyway.
It's been proven that handwriting helps you retain better, but we've gotten so electronic that most people are used to keying their notes online that it's almost like a lost art to actually handwrite notes.
If you guys could see my desk during the day, I handwrite notes and I use more Post-its than I probably give away in a workshop. And a lot of times they just end up in the trash, but it's just me needing to be able to write the stuff down to be able to give myself one more opportunity to repeat the information because it's important and I want to have the extra time to store it. So yeah, I also like to draw little pictures sometimes because sometimes the pictures will help connect me to the story. If there's a story around a conversation and I can draw something that takes me back to the conversation, it helps me bring me back to that point in time.
Another thing that I do,
It's really fascinating.
I was just gonna say, the other thing that I do is I take my notes, on a sheet of paper that's all chicken scratches, right? And then at the end of the session, I go through and I circle things or separate things visually with a marker so that I can make my notes where I want to, things that I want to keep, things that I don't want to keep.
Awesome. What was your question, David?
Well, why is that? Why? I guess I just assumed that if you were typing and writing, it was the same sort of outcome, right? But do you have any short explanation as to why the brain processes those two activities differently?
I totally do. It's the feeling of writing against the side of your hand versus fingertips, which is barely, or fingernails for women who get manicures. They typically type with the tips of their fingernails and you hear a lot of clacking. That isn't the same sensory as writing and that rubbing, it against the paper itself.
All right. Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
David, when you write, you also read it more than once because you read it and then while you're writing, you say it. And then after you write it, you read it to make sure that you wrote it correctly. So you're actually reading it multiple times.
Yeah, I know. That's great. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah. Jennifer, I agree. I cannot take notes as fast on the computer either.
I'll tell you the other thing I do is I have Otter AI and I turn Otter on when I'm in a class and I, get it picking up all of the recording because of the same thing. I can't write that fast. And I used to be able to do shorthand like 4 decades ago, but that was 4 decades ago, right? And I was pretty fast at that. It's a skill I wish I'd have kept. But if I use Otter, then what I do later is I go back and I pick out some of those nuggets of sentences that I want to remember that I didn't capture or couldn't capture fast enough. And Otter is a fairly inexpensive. I think it's like $6.95 a month to, basically have every meeting that you have recorded so that you can go back and capture later, Sometimes, I don't know if you guys have ever been in a scenario where you say something and as it comes out of your mouth, you're thinking, oh, that was good. I should have written that down. Right? And somebody will say, could you repeat that? And you're like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Not a chance. It's already gone. That was so 2 minutes ago. Yeah.
When you record in Teams, you can get transcript too. So that's not always the best.
Say again.
In Teams, when you start recording, it also does a transcript, but again, until they get used to your voice, it can be pretty ugly.
More
funny. It's funny too.
Yeah, there's some funny translations too. It's like, I know I didn't say that. We didn't talk about chickens running down the street at all.
Angie and Lori, I saw you guys trying to say something at the same time.
I was plus oneing on Teams. I use Teams for work all the time and use the recording function a lot because as you know, when you're trying to keep notes, right, you miss things or have to go back and because I work with a lot of technical people, a lot of times I have to go back and re-listen to what they said to understand actually what they said. Even if I wrote it down, just because it's something outside of my sphere of knowledge, I guess I have to go back.
Absolutely. Angie.
I just said it's kind of funny that the Teams transcripts, I've used that before and trying to go back and make sure I captured things in a meeting. And yeah, some stuff is fun. Gets you a good chuckle.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Then my other favorite question is thoughts, comments, emotional outbursts.
She does. She's not lying. She says that all the time.
No, really, really powerful info. Thank you guys for sharing. Angie, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
And yeah,
Thank you
your
so much.
story is amazing and it's fun how you guys did it together. And the memories to your point, you can, oh yeah, I remember when they said this in the picture for that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, Angie and I would like to thank you for coming out and spending time with us this afternoon. I know that, you know, in this day and age, there's a million and one things that we could all find time to do. And so thank you for choosing to spend your time with us.
Totally agree. And you guys are the first group I've told that story to. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Thank you for sharing, Angela.
you're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
All these years, I did not know that whole story, Angie.
Mm.
So it was cool.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Marilyn and I worked together back then. So she was one of my trusted confidants when I was having a bad day.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you saying, looking up and seeing that car coming. Yeah, I knew that one.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of like, what do you do?